me a favor and tell people where they can find you. I know you, Pete, and Mitch do a great job on the podcast. Tell people where they can find you and on the radio.
Sure. Kind of a nameless podcast right now. We're kind of just rolling with Washington football talk. Me, Mitch Tischler, and Pete Haley. And then on the radio, 10 to 2, 106.7, the Fan in DC, or the Odyssey app. It's me and Brian Mitchell, B. Mitch and Finlay. Keim's been kind enough to be on all of them, and they're fun. It's funny, man. We get these emails at work to like they're like national emails, right? And it's like, hey, football drives the conversation, and me and B. Mitch just look at each other. It's like, that's all we talk about.
and it's funny because people can't get enough of this. As bad as this franchise has been, there's still a hunger and an appetite for more.
Totally.
You know,
imagine if they're ever good.
I know. Well, but it's funny because I've said that for years. But I also found it funny that a few years ago in the Nats, it was great. It was a great World Series run, right? And, you know, fantastic for the city and all that. And how people were like, oh, they've surpassed the football team, Washington Redskins, whatever. I'm like, well, if it took a World Series title and then the worst year in this franchise's history, or one of them, for that to be the case, and a couple of years later, it's not even close to being the case. You know, and it's not a knock on the Nats. Totally. It's not even a knock on the Nats or the Cavs or anybody else. It just shows you how dominant this team remains. And that's why there's a lot of interest in the Carson Wentz stuff and all that. So let's start with Carson Wentz. But the first thing I want to ask is Deshaun Watson. And do you think, because obviously like it was a day later after the trade for Wentz, that we got news on Deshaun and those charges dropped or whatever the ruling was on Friday. Do you knowing what you know, do you think there's a reason they moved for Wentz a day ahead of time?
Yeah, I do.
For Watson?
Yeah, honestly, it's kind of had me recalibrate my opinion on the Wentz trade in some capacity. I think we both know that they were in on Watson if it became available. And the word around the league was that as long as there were no felony criminal charges, he won't get placed on the exempt list. And frankly, I don't even expect a suspension at this point. I mean, maybe more details could emerge in depositions or whatever, but basically it's like now that the criminal stuff is done, the league is ready to move this forward. And I honestly think, so they didn't get Russ. They found out you're not a contender for Russell Wilson. And maybe Seattle didn't want to send him in the Division II. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's kind of a convenient thing to say now. And then I think they got word, all right, Watson's about to be cleared. We're not going to be able to get him. Let's hit the gas on Wentz. So at least we're not stuck in a bidding war for Mitch Trubisky that we might not even win. Because I know Mitch was a real consideration. And that was a real thing for them. And to the point where I wonder if the Trubisky camp was a bit surprised when the Wentz trade went down. Even if they're similar, like I think they're represented by the same people, but it's still, you're doing that. I thought we were doing this. But I think the one good thing about trading for Wentz is on your team. He doesn't have a no trade clause, and he can't choose not to come. And I think perhaps they jumped on Carson knowing Deshaun wasn't going to come, or they wouldn't be an option for him. And there's a lot of things you can, and we probably will say about Carson Wentz, but athletically, just as a quarterback, he's a clear upgrade over what they have.
Correct. And that's with Deshaun. I think you're right that I think there had to be a sense of either other teams can offer more and they can't get him, or Deshaun would not have them as high on their list as they would need to get it done and go get your guy now. And you're right. I do think that Trubisky was an absolute option. And I think my understanding is that there was surprise on the trade. And I think Mitch was a real contender to come here. So let's go to that too, because if you're looking at this, and you're right, maybe they get into a bidding war and you're paying too much for them. But I do think there was a sense that that side liked Washington's roster enough to help Trubisky. So would you rather have Carson at the 28 mil and costing a third and likely a second, or Trubisky at at first I'd say 10 mil. Maybe it's between 10 to 15 or so, but no picks, and then a much lower cap space. Which, obviously they went with Wentz, but that's part of the equation here, right?
Yeah, it is. I think for me this is tough because I don't think Trubisky's very good, and like you can sell me on upside of young quarterbacks, Jordan Love. People that wanted to dismiss a Jordan Love possibility, I was like, we've never seen anything. We have nothing to base an opinion on. Trubisky started for 4 years, or for most of 4 years, and the narrative around him has just changed dramatically from sitting behind Josh Allen for a season,
He
which
got
is
better
the
by
best.
not playing.
Right, exactly. And I'm totally cognizant. Like, I get that Chicago might have been a bad situation for him, and maybe if he lands in the right place, he's got athletic skill. But is Washington the right place? There's always this assumption like, oh well, that place is no good. But this place hasn't. The only quarterback they've developed in 25 years, they ran out of town, and the team president couldn't say his name. So and it's a different regime now. I understand that, but I'm not high on Wentz, but he has been great before. Like,
right.
I think there's a number of avenues that this Carson Wentz trade will eventually go down, but one of them is he puts it together and is awesome. And should that happen a year from now, let's say Wentz is able to start 17 games, throws 30 touchdowns for the first time in a Washington uniform since Sonny Jurgensen, and looks good. Then all of a sudden they've got a bargain on their hands at 28 mil. And I wonder if you think this too. I think there's a growing sense around the league, particularly at quarterback, but really at like any true elite player. And the quarterback's its own thing, but then elite players, I think more and more clubs aren't valuing draft picks how they once did. Like, I think if you ask an NFL GM anywhere, hey, a second and a third for a franchise quarterback, they're doing it immediately.
Oh, I think especially for a quarterback, you're going to do that. And that's why this team was willing to jump in and offer 3-1s for Russell Wilson,
right,
and try and go that route, because they knew. And then it's also the quarterback himself. Again, for Russell Wilson, you're going to do that. For some other guys, you're going to be reluctant. Jimmy Garoppolo, they were reluctant to do much, but that was as much because injury history, and then you had to extend him. But if he doesn't have that injury history, I don't think they have a problem with the draft picks.
Right.
So I do agree with you. Like you look at what the Rams have done, and the Rams still have a lot of picks after the first round, or enough picks to still build.
Right.
So that's part of it too. So
I guess my only other thing with Wentz and the money, because obviously they had a lot of cap room, then they had a little bit, and they'll get a little bit more with Landon. And then I think getting a Flowers extension or restructure has to get done ASAP to open things up. I mean, this is happening tomorrow. And then there's other things you can maybe look at. I don't think I'm expecting, but I think I would rather not have a ton of cap room this year, have Carson, see how it goes, and be able to get out no problem next year, than restructure some of his deal and spread it out and then be on the hook for something down the road. I want to be able to pull the ripcord if this thing goes poorly.
Oh yeah, and I would definitely agree. I'm not up for extending that, and that is now I will say that's a steep cost. If they have to get out of this after 1 year, it's a steep cost. And my initial thought was, well, you can get out of it after a year, so okay. But when you look at it, it's really, if you do that, then you would have cost yourself 2 picks, and then who knows what other players you didn't get because you spent $28 million in cap space, whether it's re-signing McKissick or someone like that, and McCain.
Right.
Or going out and getting a couple other guys. Like, that's a steep price. Like, this has to work for more than a year, I think, for it to be worth it. Definitely.
Totally. But what terrifies me is that 2 other teams just decided, yeah, this is a really steep price to get rid of this dude. Let's get rid of him.
Right.
That's what makes the move so hard to kind of buy into, I think.
And I know that they would have talked to a lot of people about him, and coaches talk a lot to other coaches, et cetera. So I would hope that whatever they heard was enough to obviously convince them to do this. But the one thing too, when Joe Gibbs was here the second time, I did not cover him the first time, despite what anybody might think. I haven't been here that long. I've only been here for a lot of bad football, not enough good. But when Gibbs was here, like he would say, people will tell me that, oh, Joe, you can change him. You can change him. He's like, this guy's been like this for 20 some years. What makes you think I can change him in one? So he understood like what his limitations as a coach were. And so I wonder, I hope they're not pinning it on, well, we can get something out of him that others could not, because he has been in good situations for him. So I think,
I wonder if it's any port in the storm, man. Like they're just so desperate and they know this guy can help that they're just, and I think Ron has some confidence in himself on a character kind of maturation side. On like, all right, I can help this guy. But I mean, I know you saw it because we're on the same text thread. Even Wentz's like first comments about Landon in Washington.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's got to be a shock to him too. And I know people even close to him, like, they kind of hope this leads to some self-reflection as far as like, what do you need to do to make it work now? Because what you can say in Philly, well, it went south when they took Jalen Hurts, but then you went to a new team and it went south again for whatever reason. And whether it was just the owner and the GM, I don't know how much Frank Reich really wanted to get rid of him. You hear various things. So, but regardless, an organization decide to get rid of you. So if you can change, or if you do some of that reflection and come to the conclusion like, oh, maybe I have to do this and this better, then it can help them. But that's a tough that's tough to assume that that's going to happen.
Yeah, agreed. My questions are not about arm strength or, I mean, I think there's some sloppy footwork and there's some times where you got to take your check down and stuff like that. I mean, there's real like on-field criticism, but I'm more concerned that the former GM, two GMs now, don't think he can handle the criticism.
Right. And that is a concern. And, there are quarterbacks around the league too, who you hear various things about. We heard some stuff about Kyler Murray, and people would still kill to have that guy. And, and I think the one thing with Wentz that you don't hear is that one thing you do hear too, is he's a hard worker, and that it does matter to, first in, last out kind of guy.
Yep.
And I think that's a positive to build on for them, but there's a whole package that you got to make sure that you can maximize it. If he comes out here and wins 10 games each of the next 2 years, or helps them do that, then they can start to build something they haven't done in a long time. And I do agree with you. I think I don't know if it's desperation, panic, but certainly an understanding that you have to get a better quarterback and you are going to take a chance. And this is taking a chance.
Yeah, totally. I think for the first time, Ron kind of stuck his neck out. And I think if it goes poorly, I've never thought Ron's job was in danger next year, barring like a 3-14 total collapse. And I still don't. But if this thing, we've seen nuclear meltdowns here before, and I don't know what to expect. I think one thing that could really help them would be a fast start. And I really think they'd be better off starting on the road, dude. Because if they start at home and he throws a pick and however many Commanders fans are there start chanting for Heineke, because that's going to be a real thing in all this. Like every preseason game, I've never thought a quarterback could use a strong preseason showing quite like I think Wentz could this year. Just establish to all parties that you're the right guy.
So how else can they help them? Because let's look at the skill position, because this is going to lead into free agency or whatever. Do they have the skill talent there? Because Ron's been very high on that, and I think they still need to add somebody. And I always say this: I think they're aware that they could still add somebody else as well for whatever he says. But what do you think? Like, how much more do you think they have to do with the skill position, whether in free agency or the draft?
Oh man, I think I kind of laid out. Here's the thing: whether you like or don't like the Carson Wentz move, he's the guy now, and you got to go all in to try to make him
Right.
comfortable. I think the money on McKissick just might be too much. Maybe you report out. Maybe I saw somewhere that they're talking about $6 million a year. So, I mean, my immediate math with a veteran like that second contract is like, all right, well, it's going to be a 3-year 18, but 2 years at 12 mil is going to be guaranteed. You could spread it out a little bit, but I'm not sure they can pull that off.
I think that'd be
Considering
a hard one.
Right. Like right now you're sitting at, what is it, 11 before, and you got to get this Flowers thing done in the next 48 hours. You're bargain shopping. I know that they still could go quarterback. And if they love a guy at 11, fine. And then if
Right.
Wentz is your bridge, I just don't think he's a good guy for that role. I think that's already been kind of established.
Yeah, I think
I go receiver there, whether it's your boy Garrett Wilson or I like Treylon Burks a lot. I love the toughness, but I don't think they have enough at receiver, even if Curtis Samuel's healthy. And I think, I don't know, Ron was asked about Curtis Samuel's health in Indy, and it was hardly a bullish, he's ready to rock kind of statement. And maybe that's just because of the timing of it, it's February, March or whatever. But I don't think they have enough, period. Just look at the division. I think you can add more skill at receiver for sure. Maybe a corner there would make sense. But the other part of this kind that nobody wants to talk about is Terry's going into the last year of his deal.
right.
Like that's on a fast track to a franchise tag. And maybe you're able to get something done this summer. Like, we'll see. But you don't have a ton of money, so you'd have to spread that out. You'd have to kind of backload it and stuff. Like, you got to kind of prepare for that too, because the Curtis Samuel's deal is the same thing as a 3-year, but it's really just a 2-year.
Right.
And they can get like their receiver room outside of Terry doesn't scare anybody, and you got to add some talent. For me.
I'm with you on that. I would be and I agree with you. Like, at quarterback, consistently heard that they would not dismiss the possibility of taking one, but it's got to be the right guy. And it's not only got to be the right guy, it's got to be the right guy if others aren't available. So, like, if you really say, hey, got to get a receiver, and there are a couple there that you love, but there's a quarterback there you like, you're taking a receiver. You don't have to take the quarterback, and that's the position they're in now. But I'm with you. I'd want to get more skill talent to get another possible game breaker on the field, whether it is Wilson. Wilson's got that speed. I watched him, obviously, for a few years. I think he's terrific. But I don't care who it is if you get a guy there that can play and add another element that they're hoping De'Ami Brown can provide. But does De'Ami Brown project to a number 2 at this point? I think that'd be a leap of faith, and I think Curtis Samuel's a nice guy to move around and add dimension to your offense. But is he a strong number 2? I don't know that he's shown that. I think he can be a good player to have. What other areas besides that? Because, like, they don't have a lot of cap room, as we talked. So what are some minor moves that you would think they could make in free agency, and what positions to address?
They're going to have to address line. It's funny, dude. Like, I feel like we probably did a podcast last year where it's like, well, what do they need to get better at? It's wide receiver and linebacker. And then they spent money at wide out and drafted a linebacker, and they still have a need at wide receiver and linebacker.
Right.
I think you're looking at a veteran middle linebacker that doesn't cost you much, and that is one position where that's usually available. It gets crazy to try to like name the guy, but I don't think Bobby Wagner's coming. I think he's going to cost way too much, but I think there will be kind of veteran Mike linebackers available. I think, the only moves I'm curious about would be like Ioannidis. I'm just curious what they think there, because that they don't have any money that could create almost $7 million in cap space. He hasn't remember that elite kind of pass rushing deep inside presence we saw. And granted, he dealt with injuries, but he was always able to get to the quarterback. In the 2 years under Sam Mills and this new defense, now 2020 he was hurt, but 21 he wasn't. And it wasn't disruptive a lot. I don't know. That's the only kind of internal move I'd be watching.
Well, and it's funny
the Flowers thing has got to be at the top of the list.
The Flowers thing, because you can extend him, and that's what I'd always heard. They wouldn't cut him; they would extend him.
Right, and he's been good.
Yeah, and he's a solid. Like, you don't want to create another hole for them, and he did a solid job. So he's going to cost $10 million against the cap if you don't do that. So you got to do something there. Rouillet, you can do something maybe with his deal and spread it out a little bit differently. But Ioannidis would be interesting because while Tim Settle is a free agent, they have at least maintained contact with him. No offer, to my knowledge, has been made, but the fact that they've actually maintained contact says something to me, like, just in case they want to know what's he going to get and could they then do something. I don't know that. I wouldn't sit there and say they're going to bring him back. I just think it's interesting that they have maintained that level of contact with him, because who knows what would happen. I wondered about the same thing with Ioannidis, that, you know, his number is, I think it's around 6 or 7 million this year.
Yeah. So it's a 1.5 dead hit, and then I have it in front of me. It's 6.8 savings.
Okay.
So you net that out, but still on a team that. So I believe part of their kind of calculus for acquiring a quarterback was that some players would be going out via trade if you're going for one of these stars. And I mean, I think there's a couple names, but if they were going to get Russell Wilson, it would have meant like Payne or Sweat or somebody was going to be involved. Like it would have been real players. And then in turn, you're also shipping some salary out too. And Payne is the one that stands out because he's on his guarantee year. So it's all fully guaranteed. Like, you can't, one, you wouldn't cut Deron Payne. Two, you can't because of the way the money's structured. I don't think there's a trade coming there. Like, you're not getting rid of him for picks at this point, I don't think. But I do wonder, and I kind of asked Mayhew this, and I think he took it a different direction, or maybe he was just telling the truth. But like, sometimes I wonder about the intersection of coaching, trying to win this year, and figuring out the long-term vision for this roster, because you just have all these defensive linemen and you inherited that. That's not what you drafted, but are you maximizing it? Because last year on the field, you weren't maximizing it, or they weren't playing well enough, whatever it was. But like, if you're going to have a ton of resources allocated, they got to be performing. And I don't know that anybody would say they really did last year. And so then it's like, well, do you have to re-examine that?
I think in that case, yeah, because you're looking at, like, if Sweat and Young both hit this year, you're looking at in that 25 to 30 range when you go to extend them, based on what you look at what Max Crosby just got, and it's probably going to be in that ballpark. So yeah, that would be tough to keep those two and Allen. And then with Payne, it's like, what do you do? And so, just to be clear for people listening, I don't know what's going to happen with Ioannidis. I think, just like JP, just, you kind of look at the roster and say, well, how can they free up money? Well, here's one way. If they wanted to go that way, you can do that. What about with Landon Collins? Well, go ahead. You had something.
Well, I was like, one way they can free up some cash is Wes Schweitzer, but I think they need him. I think he's their right guard, and I think he's pretty good.
I like Wes. I like him because he's got some nasty. Pete knows, I like to say he blocks like a son of a bitch. So but he does. Like,
who was it?
It was the receiver.
The receiver was old.
Yeah, he's like 50 years old, but that
Michael Floyd.
Who could not run, had no speed, but he could block. He was an animal when he was blocking, man. He was tough. But Schweitzer has got that animal instinct when he's blocking as well. And now he's not the greatest pass blocker. He's okay, but he's really tough in the run game. And then Sadiq Charles, how does he develop? But that's where, you're going to have to fill some depth situations. Cornelius Lucas, do you bring him back? Can you? If I'm him, I want to go somewhere and play. And again, I go back to Settle. If I'm Settle, I want to go somewhere where I know I'm going to play. Not just get money, but know I'm going to play, because that's how you get those other big contracts. But Landon Collins, what do you think they're going to miss without him?
I think he's a steadying presence locker room wise. He's not like the super vocal leader, but I think everybody likes him and respects him. He's a hard worker. Obviously, once they got him in the right role, I think he played pretty well, probably the second half of last season. Maybe it was a little before that. But To me, this was always a no-brainer. It's just far too much money. And
Right.
even if he would have taken the reduced role, I think, Josina said, he's like, I took the first pay cut, but when they asked for another one, I couldn't say yes. What was the first pay cut getting him down to? 6?
I don't know. Yeah.
Like, I don't know, man. I think it was far too much money for what that is. I think, Cam Curl stepped into that role really well 2 years ago as a 7th-round rookie. Curl's obviously proven himself as a really, really good player, but I think Ron's always talked about playing as rookies. You got to start throwing some of these guys in these situations. Like, what do we know about Derek Forrest? Like, he's probably got to be part of the equation this year.
Not a whole lot. He has to be, and whether it's as a key special teams guy or something like that,
Right.
taking over the app key role.
Trying to get me fired up on a Sunday.
Well, I've heard that they hadn't been in contact with him, so there you go. I don't know. We'll see. But you're right about.
If they were in contact with him, I'd question what the hell they were doing.
Yeah. Well, but to your point though, I also think with Landon, I wonder if you're going to go. Let's say they can't find a middle linebacker for agency because there aren't a lot of great ones out there. So it may be difficult to do that. And it is, to me, it's a good draft for that position in the first several rounds. So you could find a guy there, but now you have a third guy who can play with some speed in that position. That to me lessened the need for a Collins, especially at that money.
Yeah.
And so you lose some of the versatility on defense because to go to those 3 safety packages, but I think if they play it right with that linebacker position, you can mitigate. But then that also assumes that Jamin Davis plays to a certain level and Cole Holcomb plays to a certain level on the outside as well. So,
and I mean, you're talking about 3 safety sets. What's going to happen with McCain? And I recognize he's not necessarily a fan favorite, but Jack and Ron love him. So
I thought he did well in the second half of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it became painfully obvious that you couldn't have Collins and McCain deep, right? Like that wasn't your tandem. I don't understand why it wasn't more obvious to them, but yeah, I think once it was Curl and McCain back there, I agree. I think he played a lot better. I mean, what is that like when we get to Wednesday night and they haven't signed anybody yet? Like, are we talking? Are the top 2 safeties on the depth chart? Like, what's going on? I have no idea what's going on with DeShazer.
Yeah, I don't know. I would be, and that's another, you can cut him and save $2 million, and that might be the way you go. But
yeah, it's with all things considered, it's almost hard to not see that coming. And honestly, I've been in contact with him a little bit, and none of it's been about football. So I don't even know where kind of his headspace is at. Yeah, I think you're right about that. That is $2 million there.
And that's
any chance they try to get a deal with Holcomb?
Maybe they do.
It's not a big cap. I mean, it's 2.6 with no guarantee. But I mean, how much are you going to spread out? I don't think that's enough worth doing.
I don't know, but I know they like him outside, so we'll see. But I do think McCain is an interesting. And again, not that McCain was some Pro Bowler here; he just got better in the second half. But they don't have anybody to replace him. That's the thing. You like when Landon went down, you had Cam that could go replace him. You don't have that guy in the roster now. And that's where they're going to, because so if you let him go, you've got to find that guy. And I think I don't know that there's going to be some big demand for him on the market. So I think some of these guys are going to test. If you remember it was several years ago, they cut D'Angelo Hall and everybody's, oh, he's done here. And then a week or two later, he re-signed because the market never developed. So I'll be curious to see with some of these guys, if and when they hit the market, what do they find available for them? Because I don't know. I mean, McKissick, I love McKissick. I think he'd be a tough loss for them, but he's coming off that neck injury. Is he going to get that kind of money? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it part of the Collins willingness to take the first pay cut is because he knows there's not another yacht offer coming his way. I think that was a specific set of circumstances that kind of led to that. It'll be interesting. I think defensively they'll bounce back a little just because I kind of think they like the numbers and the odds of variance on NFL defenses suggest they will.
And they're not playing
and
the
they
same
don't
caliber
play.
of quarterbacks all
Right,
year.
right. You don't play Rodgers, Mahomes, Herbert, Brady. That helps too.
Yeah. So you're the last thing, your expectation like mine, we're going to be watching a lot of paint dry on Wednesday.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that honestly, even when I kind of thought this would be a Trubisky and a draft pick, I was told last month that outside of QB, don't expect a lot of action in this cycle. And I think that's accurate. And I know a lot of fans were excited about the Amari Cooper stuff. And I was like, they don't have the money now. Not to mention, if you pay a wideout now, like you've already paid Curtis Samuel 12 times what Terry's making. And if you're going to bring somebody else in this year, that guy would probably be making Amari Cooper's making 20 times what Terry's making. At some point, somebody's paying attention, whether it's Terry or his representatives.
There's no doubt. And you know how that goes in the locker room too. Like, wait a minute, take care of me and I know like Terry's in that, he's on the rookie deal, but you got to take care of me. That's why teams are sometimes reluctant to give guys pay cuts and bring them back, because they go in the locker room, they know what everybody else is making. They can find it out just like we can. And if you're outperforming that guy and he's making that much more, it's like, wait a minute, when there was been receivers here before, they're like, wait a minute, this guy's making this kind of money. Ask him to go block this guy. That definitely happened. That could be a problem. So I agree with, I didn't think that was going to happen for that reason. And then, your primary goal here in this is to extend Terry. You've got to keep that guy around. If you go out and get a Cooper, I think that makes it tougher. If you draft somebody, I think it's going to make it easier, because now that guy's not going to make what he's making and wouldn't for several years. So you can build around that. And then, to your point, if Curtis has another tough year with that, he's gone, but you still have your receiving core. And I think the other thing is if you bring another guy like Wilson, those top guys in this draft, they have speed. So you bring another guy in that 4.3, 4.4 range, you've got a whole range of receivers that run that with a big arm quarterback who can throw down the middle. And so I think that would work well. So, that to me would be, but yeah, I don't expect, and you're right. Like even before this, I thought the big thing would be the quarterback, because that's what we knew. And then beyond that, it was going to be wait and see, get to that secondary market that always develops, where they got McKissick before, they got Logan Thomas before, Wes Schweitzer, pivotal guys like that. And then you get to the draft. So, I'm kind of expecting not a whole lot of action on Wednesday.
Yeah. And it's really been pretty remarkable. And I'd say a big opportunity for Hurney and Mayhew and the staff Rivera has assembled, because Ron's first year with Kyle Smith kind of running the front office, they really did well. I mean, I think their draft was a pretty big success.
Yeah.
Just getting Curl and Gibson in that draft class, addition to Chase Young.
Yeah.
The free agents, Schweitzer, McKissick, Thomas. I mean, all those guys played well, probably over-delivered on their first deals. Logan already got a second deal. Yeah. They want JD, but might not be able to afford him. Last year was not the same level of success, free agency or the draft. Like you'd really hope they can put some things together this year.
They need Jamin to elevate outside. And I think he'll be a lot better outside. I'm not writing him off, but he's got to show it. Because if he does, then it starts to look a little bit different. But then you'd need to get Forrest to become at least a key special teams contributor and a key backup. And then you can start to look at that class a little bit better. And then again, Diami, you that's the one problem this team has had, those high picks, those first three, especially rounds 2 and 3, you need to get them to hit more. Terry hit, but you need more out of that. Cosme did a nice job. So, but I still
Cosme just got to stay on the field. Dude, what about St. Juice with the concussion stuff? He looked like he was going to be a really useful piece. And then I don't know.
Anytime you start dealing with that, you start to get, I think you have to start, I don't know about crossing your fingers is a little bit hokey of an expression, but I think you just have to be careful. That's all. And so
totally. Totally.
So there you go. JP, I appreciate you coming on, and thanks a lot. We'll see you soon, but I don't know I guess we'll see maybe if there's a Carson Wentz press conference, but there you go.
Dude, I was thinking about this. If there is a Carson Wentz presser, I think they should do it at the exact same time as like the Russell Wilson presser. Like, I think they should try to go under the radar with this young man as much as possible, because I think you got a fan base that is willing to support, but like his first public comments don't seem like he's not that he's not thrilled, but he's not like, oh man, I can't wait to get to Washington. And maybe that will come, obviously. But I think if I was running this thing, I would try to stay under the radar and let him get acclimated and comfortable, and let the fans kind of get to know him slowly.
I think so. But they will. I do think they want to show him how much they believe in him and support him and how excited they are, which is why there will probably be something. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do a presser, right? Like, you just traded for a new quarterback. It'll be fun. Yeah, always is.
So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we're back here talking about the same positions next year at this time. So thanks, JP.
Thanks, John. No problem.